it's also important to remember that we all are struggling in this way, right? Like so many people are needing more connection. I think that this is just like a genuine thing, especially coming out of COVID. Like we all went through this time where we just like all retreated into like our shells. And it's like, and it, I think it's been harder or easier for different people to kind of break out of that. And so remembering that like everyone's struggling, you're not alone. And I think that's something really important to remember. Welcome to A Way of Thinking podcast. This podcast is dedicated to lighting the way towards greater inner peace and purpose. Hello and welcome to this episode of A Way of Thinking. I'm your host, Jessica Huang. And in today's episode, we're going to talk all about building up the community and support that you have around you. So stay tuned to listen more about that. And before we get started, let me make a few quick announcements. So first off, if you've been enjoying listening to A Way of Thinking and you would like to donate to the podcast, you can do so at jessicahuangcoaching.com/donate. And it is so appreciated for all of you tuning in and listening to these episodes. I hope you're gaining so much benefit from all the wisdom that's being shared here. Secondly, if you are someone who is looking to make a change in your life, if you're looking to transition from that job that you were told to do, something like a corporate job, anything along those lines, and you really want to move into something that feels more creative, that gives you that spark, that wakes you up in the morning, then I invite you to join me for a free strategy session, and we can work on how to transition and move you into that dream job that dream career that you've always wanted and never thought that you could have for yourself. So I hope I can connect with you and help you in your journey. Okay, now let's dive into today's show. All right, so today we are talking all about community and support. And the reason why we're talking about this is it was interesting. I was being interviewed recently for a podcast, and this question came up around how do you make these big changes? Like what was necessary? And, I think for me, I am very fortunate that I have had, there's certain people in my life that I feel like have been kind of this undercurrent that have been like big support systems for me. And I'm very, very lucky for that. And also, I've definitely spent a lot of time building support around me. And so I think about, especially for people who are trying to make big life changes, one of the biggest challenges that people can face is just feeling like they're completely unsupported. And, I think about, there's so many people out there who have literally no one that really understands what they're going through or can really help them and guide them along their journey. And it makes this path so much harder, or it can stop people completely in their tracks from really making the changes in their lives. And, oftentimes the people in our lives tend to be people that are just like us. And so if you are in, let's say, a corporate job, then maybe there's a very high likelihood that most of the people around you are also in corporate jobs. And, that was definitely something that was very true for me, is that most of my community during that time were people that were in regular, steady jobs, just as I was. And so when I was looking to go into a different field, it was like, how do I start that journey and where do I begin? And, and it was very important for me to build up kind of just a support, a really thorough support system. And B, it was really important for me to find people that were kind of guides or support in a real way towards where I was trying to go. And so first off, I want to empathize fully with you. If you are someone that's sitting there going, nobody gets me. I totally relate to that feeling. When I was starting down this whole idea of becoming a coach and starting this podcast, I felt like I was a crazy person half the time. I was like, am I nuts? Like everyone else around me is going down the path that I've been going down, and they seem to be fine with it. And then here I am going, I can't do this anymore. Like this is not working for me. I need a change. And it's really hard when you don't have a lot of other people around you that are doing something similar, because you feel like an outsider, right? Like you feel like something's wrong with you, like your brain is just haywire. Like these are the thoughts I think that come up for us when we're doing something different than what everyone else is doing. And it's so hard, right? Because it's that negative kind of voice in the back of our heads kind of diminishing us and saying like maybe I can't do this, because it just feels like such a lonely journey. And so that's why this episode is dedicated to helping you find the support that you need to make the changes that you want in your life. And this is regardless of whatever you're going through. This is just, I feel like, to me, just like having a fulfilling life. Like we are naturally social creatures. And I think it's really hard when we feel lonely and feel that no one gets us, or that we're on going through a journey by ourselves. And I think back to for instance, like when I quit my job, and I had like the trifecta. I've mentioned this before. I quit my job, I had a relationship end, and I was moving back into New York City. This was like right after COVID, or like right after the worst of COVID. And I felt very alone. I had some, as I said, I had a little bit of foundation, and that was great. But I felt like I was going into moving here feeling very alone. And so I'm going to share some of the things that I did that helped me kind of build up community around me. And because I feel like that's something that has really flourished in my life. And so I want that for you too. Okay. So let's dive into some of these ideas of what really helped me. Okay. So the first thing that I think about is like, you really want to look for people who have done the thing that you are wanting to do. And so it's like building up role models. And it's interesting because they don't have to be exactly aligned to what you're doing, but you want to see people who have like created change in their lives, who have gone down a path of switching things. And I think that this podcast, in many ways, I was kind of reflecting on it, is really highlighting this element of change, right? Like most of the guests, if not all, have gone through a pretty significant or many significant life changes, and have come out of the other side like in happier, more fulfilled places. And so seeing Ace, it's so important to see that it's possible. And B, I think it's really important to just like hear what they have to say, to have that kind of in your back pocket, that idea like, if they can do it, I can too. And that's something I think that is super important. For me, it's interesting because when I first left my job, I didn't know where I was going, which was interesting. And so I was really kind of like, well, nobody has done this, or nobody around me has done this. And it was really hard to face that. And so I think it's really important to look for that, to look for people who have done the thing that you are trying to do, because it's like building up evidence. It's building up evidence that it's safe, that it's possible, that they can do it, and so can you, as I said before. And safety, I think, is such a big part of making a big shift, because it's like our we don't like to do things that are scary, right? Like we don't like to do things that seem like I describe sometimes me quitting my job as it felt like I was jumping off a cliff. And that sometimes I'm like shocked I even did it because it's so scary. And it's like, how can you build up more of that framework around you that's showing you that like it is safe to make this change. It is safe to go down this path and you will come out of the other side and be okay. And the thing is that no matter what you do, like there's so many options. And I do want to remind you of that because we can often pigeonhole ourselves into saying, like, I have to know what is in front of me and this is the way I'm going. And, oftentimes, like, we're coming from a place where we had that, right? We're coming from a place where we were in a steady job. There was kind of this like pathway that was laid out in front of us going like, well, for me in finance, it was like, well, I'm a finance manager. I'm going to go into being a finance director. Maybe I'll become a CFO one day. And so there's this kind of laid out path in front of you. And when you're making a big change, it feels like, well, the path is gone. So, like, what do I do now? And so, what you're doing here in looking for examples is you're kind of constructing a path, right? Like, it might not look exactly like that other person's does, but it's showing you, like, here's how someone else did it and that it is possible. And so, you're able to kind of gain some idea of what that could look like. And so that's why I think role models is like a hugely important thing. And I want to address that first in terms of being able to make a shift. And then along those lines, so, I can't help but mention this as a coach. Coaches obviously are a huge, incredible resource because from my experience, the people that we tend to help as coaches are people who were a version of ourselves, right? Like I'm helping people move from corporate jobs into their creative career because that's what I've done, right? And so it's something that I have experience in. And plus, I end up gaining all this experience through my clients. But there is something to be said for having the support of a coach because especially if you find one that does have something that is aligned with what the journey that you're looking to take, they're coming in with that experience. And we're literally, we do the training and the work because that's our job, is to help people take them from where they are to where they want to go. And so I look at, my coach Patty was a huge influence on me. And I look at how she was able to model, having more possibilities. She modeled becoming a coach for me, obviously. And so there's something huge around the ability to have support as far as a coach is concerned, if that's something that if that's something you're interested in. And, and I absolutely cannot not mention therapy as well as an option of support. And, my therapist was a huge support for me, especially during times when I really needed it through this transition. And it was really important for me to have her kind of in my back corner and be able to talk through the struggles I was going through and through this experience. And, I think back and it's like, for me, it's like, sometimes we don't have the people right in our vicinity who can be that support for us. And I think this is something that's really important to note, right? Like, as I was saying before, everyone around me when I was starting down this journey were not in kind of the situation or wanting to go into this different direction the way that I was. And so I felt like it was hard. It was harder for me to be able to talk to them because they couldn't relate to what I was going through. And so it was helpful for me to have professionals like my coach, like my therapist, who could provide that support for me. And sometimes that's the best option especially at the beginning, because, I look at right now, like I am a huge part of that support system for many of my clients. And in some ways, like, I'm the one person that they really have that really gets them on that journey. And I don't take that lightly. Like, that to me is so important. And it's such a important relationship to me that I'm like, I'm helping model that for them. Like, I take that very seriously, that I am role modeling for them what they want for themselves and that it's possible. And so, that I think is a huge thing about having a coach in your life, is having someone that can guide you, that can help you lay out that path that we were talking about. So that to me is the power of coaching. And I always, to me, it's like I always have a coach. I have a business coach. I'm connected with a lot of coaches, and I think that my coaches are a very important part of my life, because they help me find my footing. They help me take those important steps and not get stuck along the way. And it's easy to get stuck sometimes. We get caught up in our minds, and I think it's so important to have people to be able to, like, talk through the places that we get stuck. And so that's my little 2 cents on coaches. But I want to talk beyond that as well, because there's so many ways to really build up community and build up support. And so one of the things that I did, so as I mentioned, when I moved back into the city, I was kind of like, well, now what? I don't have my job to kind of provide me with friends in the way that it used to. Now what do I do? And so for me, it was building up, finding communities that were like-minded and interested in the things that I was doing. So, I started off with going back to my old yoga studio, and it's interesting because I think back to, like, when I was doing yoga for many years, I didn't talk to, like, anyone. I would go to these studios, I would go on my mat, I would do my practice, and I would leave. And here's the thing that I think is challenging for people, is, like, it's starting up conversations and building your way into like, actually being a part of community. And so some tips that I have around this is, if there are communities that, if they have events as part of these communities, I highly suggest signing up for different events, because I think that events versus, like, your regular class often kind of has more of that community feel, has a little bit more of, like, people's, like, openness and willingness to interact with each other. And so there's something about that, I think, that can open the door a little bit more than, like, just going to a class. But even if you're going to a class, the thing is, like, it's regardless of what you're going to, the thing is, you have to actually talk to people. So how do we actually start conversations with people? And it's hard. Even as I think I'm kind of extroverted and introverted, but I struggle with this too, so oftentimes. And so one of my little tips, that it was funny, this kind of came up in an interview recently, and I think it's a really good tip, is look for people that are doing that you admire in the class, and compliment them on it. And so, first off, who doesn't love a compliment? Like, let's be honest. But secondly, I think it's really powerful to gain friendships of people who are, like, further down the line, or more advanced than you in whatever thing that you're doing. Because it's funny, because a lot of people will look at especially, I think I think in terms of, like, a yoga class, right? Like, there can easily be comparison, and you can easily make that comparison negative, right? You can easily go, that person is better, I don't want to be around them, and create this negative dialogue around them. Or the other thing that you could do is look at it for inspiration. And so this is the thing that I've really shifted my mentality on, is really looking to these people as inspiration. And there's this little thing that we do, that Dharma would share with us around this, is like, or I don't remember if it was Dharma or one of our other teachers, but anyway, I love this idea. You're literally imagining yourself as doing what they're doing. right? So when I see someone in my yoga class doing a pose that I can't do, I'm like, oh, I imagine that I'm doing that pose like at like in it alongside them. And they're just showing me A, that it's possible, and B, like just just that it's giving you that ability to imagine yourself doing it yourself. And I love this idea because it's like our imaginations are so cool, right? Like it's like, to me, it's like the things that we want for ourselves, we have to, there's so much power in just imagining yourself doing it. And I feel like it helps push you along the way and get there a little faster when you are visual, like really visualizing yourself like I'm already doing it, you know? And so they're just modeling. It's that role model thing that I was telling you about earlier. And so taking that in as inspiration and going like, well, they're just helping me get there faster. They're just showing me that it can be done. And so go up to these people, compliment them, start that conversation. And I think that this is such a powerful thing to do. And because surrounding yourself with, it's important to have two types of people. It's important to have people that are at the same level as you. So, you know, because you're kind of like going through the journey together, and you can kind of, you know, be able to share in your struggles, and you know, push each other along. But there's also something really important about having people who are ahead of you, because the people that are ahead of you are showing you how to get there, right? And they can offer little tidbits around like what helped them get to where, from where you are to where they are. And so I think it's super important to have both of those, like people who are with you in the journey and people who are ahead of you in the journey. And so start those conversations, compliment the people that you see like doing something cool, you know, like, I mean, it doesn't even have to be that, right? You can just comment how you like their outfit or whatever, you know, like it doesn't have to be that complicated. And I think we overcomplicate it a lot, right? And so, you know, I get it. It's so, it can be intimidating. And I think that I was definitely there for a very long time. You know, as I mentioned, I spoke to nobody at yoga for many, many years. And it took me time to build up community. And it, you know, for me, it was doing 200-hour teacher training was a big, like, kind of push and jumping point where I felt like I was becoming a part of the community. But you know, it might not be like that, but it's like, what kind of events or things that are going on can you become a part of, and just have, be open to starting those conversations. And honestly, it's like, you never know. Like, I think just having that mentality, sometimes people will come to you, you know, maybe you don't have to start that conversation yourself every single time, and you certainly don't. But I think it's also important to remember that we all are struggling in this way, right? Like, so many people are are needing more connection. I think that this is just like a genuine thing, especially coming out of COVID. You know, like, we all went through this time where we just like all retreated into like our shells. And it's like, and it, you know, I think it's been harder or easier for different people to kind of break out of that. And so remembering that like everyone's struggling, you know, you're not alone. And I think that's something really important to remember. Okay, so other thoughts around how to find different types of communities. So the thing is, you know, don't just limit yourself to one thing, right? So I could say like the only thing that I want to have community around is yoga, but it's like, I think it's really, it might be helpful. It might be important to kind of have a variety and try out different spaces. And you know, for me, it was like, I have yoga. I actually I started doing acro yoga last year, and that brought a different community. It's funny because they sound like they're the same thing, but they have totally different communities and types of people around them. And so it was building out around that. And then another one that I thought, that I think is really interesting is, so I joined, so so this is almost like a trickle down effect of everything I've been talking about so far. So a role model that I have is Jay Shetty. And so we have Jay Shetty as my role model, and then he has a community called, or a coaching program called the Genius Community, and so every week he comes on live and he does like these live coaching sessions. But part of that is that he has live Genius meetups, and so throughout the country there's these meetups, so you could sign up and go and meet people from the community, and I think that it's like the things that I see around this is like you start with start with someone that's a role model, or you start with like someone that is of interest to you, and you build from there, right? Like if there's a certain type of person that is attracted to and following Jay Shetty. And so to me, it's like that building off of that made me go, oh, there's likely like-minded people in his community. So what would it be like if I actually utilize that in order to find more like-minded people for myself? And so, I happen to be fortunate in that Jay's community does include this kind of in-person element, but you could also start with just the online side of that. There's so many communities built upon some of these big names, like I think of Jay Shetty, Lewis Howes, like all these big, Mel Robbins would be a great, Tony Robbins, all these people, they have communities. Like there's so many people that follow them. And so tapping into that can also be a great place to kind of start with, and seeing if there is an in-person element, great. If there's not, can you post into these online communities and ask if there's anyone that lives in your area, or and would like to meet up, see if or just start in the online community and start building friendships through that. And I think about the fact that, so I was part of Jay's group for a long time, and it wasn't until that time when I was going, oh my God, I'm moving back into New York City and I don't know anyone, that I went, like there are these meetups. What if I tried to go to one of them and see if I could meet people through that? And I remember walking into the first one, I was so nervous, and then it was just being embraced by people who understood me. And it was so nice. And I love the friends I've made through that community, and they've become a huge, important part of my support system. So I feel like starting there and like looking at different online communities, maybe building out to in person from there, that's also a great option, and something that proved really beneficial to me. And along those lines also is the idea of just like meetups. A lot of different cities have meetups through, the Meetup app. There's all these different things. And, I think sometimes we have to think a little bit outside the box in order to find our people. But also it's like, where do you like to hang out? Like if you love art, like where do people, like, can you find events at museums? Can you find meetups with like other artistic people? I mean, here in New York City, there's kind of like a wealth of things, but I think that it's like, if you need to start online, and B, it's like, I just think that there's more people out there than you think that do like the things that you also like, and being able to tap into that and figure out like what interests you, and following that to find people that that would also share in those interests. And so that's how I ended up kind of building up like this wealth of great friends, but not just great friends, like people who, as I said, understand me. Because at the end of the day, like I feel like that's such like a basic human need, is like, it's okay if some people in your life don't I don't think anyone fully understands you, but it's nice to have people who understand like different elements to you, right? Like the people from the Jay Shetty group, they're all people who are very interested in personal development, and they're all people who really want to grow and learn. And so we have this like shared commonality there that that is really beneficial to building friendship and support around, right? And so I think it's just really important to build up a network of people that get you. And especially if you are looking to move in a different direction, I really highly suggest like looking for communities that are in line with the direction that you're looking to go in. For me, it's like I've built up a great network of coaching friends, and that's been so important, because it's like the thing that I think has been really amazing about it is like you're sharing ideas, you're learning from each other, and I think it just helps you move faster, honestly. And well, it's very ironic that I just said that, because there's this phrase that I was sitting with, which is, if you want to go fast, go alone, and if you want to go far, you go together. And the funny thing is, as I was saying that, I was like, it's funny, because actually, to me, if you want to go fast and far, you go together. Because I feel like without support and community, you're so much more likely to get stuck. You're so much more likely to kind of spin out by yourself and like really like hold yourself back, and it really makes a difference to have people around you who can go, oh, wait, have you thought about this? I started a lot of this journey by myself. I started this podcast entirely alone, and I think about now, it's like if I were to do it all over again, it would be totally different, because I would actually, I was just using the internet and Google, which was great, but if I had the support of other people who had started podcasts, it would have been a different journey, because I would have been able to ask them questions and be able to kind of bounce ideas off each other. So now that I have more support, now that I know more people who are podcasters, who are coaches, who are doing the things that I'm doing, it really benefits me in terms of being able to bounce those ideas off of them and be able to propel myself forward. And so that's really the thing about community. It's like, it's really helping you move in the direction that you really want to move in, and just not get stuck, not spin your wheels on things that are not going to help you at the end of the day. Because when you are surrounded by people who don't get you, who are actually sometimes saying things that are actually taking away from that thing that you want, like that's not going to help you get there, right? Like it's already a hard enough journey to make a change for yourself. And if you are surrounded by people who are negatively reflecting on that, then it's only going to make the journey harder. So, I really hope that that this is landing for you and can help you on your journey, because to me it's worth it, and it's worth going after the thing that you really want. And the way to really make it happen is to have that community and support around you, and be able to share in those ideas, to share in those struggles, to know that you're not alone, because you're not. Like, you are not the only person trying to do the thing that you're doing. I can almost guarantee it. There are millions and millions of people. You're not alone. And I think it's really important to remember that, that we are not alone, that there is someone else that is struggling in the same way that we're struggling. And maybe we can just help each other along that path and get us there a little bit with a little more ease than going it alone. So I hope that this was helpful. And I hope that you will give it a shot, and something I want to say, which I mention a lot of the times, is like, if this is really challenging for you, if you're someone that's like, I'm an introvert, I'm not about this stuff, take it slow. take small steps, because sometimes it's like it feels like this colossal task and then we don't want to get started. And it's like, how can you challenge yourself to go to like one event? How can you like challenge yourself to talk to one person? That's all you need to do. And giving yourself credit for that, and really going like, I did it. I talked to one person, whether or not that ends up becoming like a great friend or anything. Like, it's just that you put yourself out there. You started that one conversation, and really, you know, making note of that. And so that, and then it will blossom from there, is how I like to look at it. So if you are feeling alone in this journey, I want to remind you, you are not alone. Seek out help, seek out community, find those people, because you don't need to be surrounded by people that are putting you down. You don't need to be surrounded by people who don't understand you, that don't get your journey, and undermine it. That's never what we want for ourselves. And so it's so important. It's so important to find people that get us, that can help us in our path. And you deserve to make that change for yourself. You deserve to go and create the life that you really want. And so I remind you, if you are someone that you feel like I could be your part of that support system, then I would be honored to do that for you. So please reach out, book a free strategy session with me. The link is in the show notes, and I would be so happy to help you in your journey. So if you are looking to make that shift from corporate into something more creative, and going after that thing that lights you up, that brings that spark and that light into your eyes, then I would be honored to help you in that. And so thank you so much for listening. And I hope that you find that beautiful community that is going to support you in your journey. Thank you again, and I will see you on the next episode.